I'll find us how we go live on Facebook over here, live on Facebook. Find my page. Zoom meeting title. Live chat. Keep putting a U in your name, but it's B-O-R-N-E.
Yeah, everyone does.
Page. Okay, here we go.
Awesome.
Going over now. All right, looks like we're live on Facebook.
It does look that way. Very exciting.
All right, and yeah, thanks for joining us. It's pretty exciting to have you here.
No, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So we've been talking a little bit about I guess having you on and what we're going to do. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and just for those of us who sort of haven't met you before?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is based around the teaching side of it. So I'll tell you a bit of my history and background in regards to that. So I left high school and didn't really know what to do. And my grandmother said to me, if you don't work with children, I'll turn in my grave. So I'm like, oh, okay, right. So I guess I'll become a teacher. And just kind of went with that. Absolutely loved so many aspects of the teaching, but there was definitely aspects of it that I didn't agree with. So really loved working with the children, really loved having that influence on them, and had an amazing career as a teacher. No longer a full-time teacher. I still like to do fill-in days for teaching whenever I'm back at my sort of local schools. I'll give them a call and turn up and really enjoy my time with the kids. So I absolutely love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so what was it that sort of got you out of it and into what you're doing now, which is like helping women and with health and things like that?
Yeah, so it's actually quite a relevant story, and one that was quite indicative of what the education system is like and the parts that I didn't like about it. So the main part was there was a change in curriculum. So I think it was like the fourth or fifth change in curriculum since I'd been a teacher. And, you know, that was a common occurrence, and that was fine. And I could deal with that and adapt and change. And, you know, it's important to update and change if it's for the betterment of the children.
Yeah.
So what happened was the new curriculum came out, and I looked through it all, and I was a health and PE teacher at the time. So the new health and PE curriculum came out, and I looked through it all, and through all my study as a personal trainer and all of my nutrition study and all of my mental wellness studies, I looked at it and was like really annoyed actually with it. I was just like, this is crap. And I went to my principal and I said to her, oh, you know, there's a lot of things in here that are really outdated, like, because generally by the time like the curriculum writers, they'll start, this is most up-to-date information. By the time it's rolled out, it's quite a few years later by the time it goes through the whole process. So by the time this was rolled out, there was some things in there that were so outdated. And I'm like, this is just crap. I'm not teaching the kids this. And she said, you have to. And for the first 12 months, there's no changes allowed, absolutely no adaptations. And I said, I can't do it. And I resigned. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And that's good. And just sort of taking a stand and sort of, yeah, like this is what you value. And I guess that's like the blessing and the curse of being a free thinker and going sort of outside of the box and going and doing those extra studies and sort of surrounding the dragon and chasing after when that's your passion. I mean, helping children and helping others and things like that. So you sort of went after it and you learned so much more. And it's really interesting that how you said that when the research comes out and the changes come about, and it takes a few years for it to roll into the curriculum and go through all the red tape and things like that. Because I've touched on that a few times lately, and that's the beauty of just sort of being pretty free in the way that we can research and think and find things, because we just go after it. You know, we're not sort of told where to look and how to find things and what to teach.
Absolutely. And when we can use the most up-to-date information that we have, and, you know, it may, with anything scientific or anything research-based, it may become outdated in a few years' time. And when we know better, we can do better. But then when we're like, you know, in big corporations like Education Queensland or nursing, like I've had this conversation with a lot of my nursing friends also, and even like doctor friends and psychologists as well. I've had a conversation about the psychology textbook that is current today, that they are supposed to base all of their findings or all of their diagnoses off. And my psychology friend said that being gay is actually still seen as a mental disorder in that textbook. And I'm like, really? That is rubbish. And that's why being governed by such a strict guidelines can sometimes not, like, I understand it's important, but sometimes it can be detrimental.
Yeah, one thing that really opened my eyes when I was joining the Army Reserve, I was talking to the psychologist who interviews all the candidates, and the life coaching came up somehow, and she said that the thing that she's got against it is that, she said, as a psychologist, every year we have to research a certain thing, and we're told we have to get up to date with this certain thing. And she said that, you know, the others aren't regulated like that.
Yes.
And I didn't go any further, but I thought, I don't know, to me, that's not really a good thing. Like, it's better to not be told that you have to stay up to date with this particular model. Because if you're doing it because it's your passion and because that's what you want to do and that's your purpose and mission in life, you're not going to be, you don't need to be pushed to say, to update and research, because you're just going to do it constantly, naturally. And you're going to do it, you're going to do it freely as well, not just on this one model.
Absolutely. That's it exactly. And like, there's that balance. And I definitely understand that there has to be guidelines and regulations, and being governed by certain things can be helpful. But like you said, if you're passionate about it, it's your purpose, it's your drive, then you will, this, like for me, women's health has been something I've been thrown on a very personal level. And the teaching side of it and children's health, I've been and experienced that on a very personal level. So that drives me to find out more and want to know and to do the best for the people that I work with.
It's such a good segue into a few different subjects, because following your passion and your mission and whatever it is that lights you up, in order to do that, we kind of need to have our basic survival needs met, right? And especially, I mean, I think maybe as a teacher, were you a primary school teacher? Is that right?
Yep.
So seeing these young kids, you'd probably see a lot that were struggling to feel like they were, that their survival was covered and taken care of.
Yeah, so many did not have those basic survival needs met. Yeah, and it's, a lot of people can be in denial about it, but it happens way too often.
Yeah, and I mean, at first we sort of think, okay, they've got tap water, they've got food and probably shelter. I mean, a lot of the time they get sent to school without food and things like that, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, food and shelter are some of the most common issues we see as teachers. You know, shelter as in a bed to sleep in, you know, the right amount of sleep because there is the right environment to sleep. And I had this conversation with someone recently about homework, and that's a whole nother topic that I could just go on about for ages. We'll probably avoid that. But they're like, oh, you know, homework's a good thing, we should all do it. I'm like, yeah, if they've got pencils, they've got food, they've got an environment they can do it in, it can be helpful. But if they don't have food and they don't have a shelter, homework is more detrimental than it is helpful.
It kind of highlights what's lacking, I guess, in order to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it's such a great segue. Like, we want them to find their spark and follow that and do what lights them up. But it's not only if their survival needs aren't met, but if they're perceiving that their survival needs aren't met, right? And I know for kids, the younger you go, the more they need to be aware of that connection with their parents and know that their parents love them and care about them. Whether or not they do might be irrelevant to, does the child perceive that they're cared for, loved, and they're going to be provided, that there's a secure attachment and they're safe to then focus on what lights them up.
Absolutely, 100%. And perception is everything. Like you may be loved in the way that your parents love, but if you don't feel that love, then it's irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. We go down to love languages and things like that. And you're right. I mean, a lot of parents, what I'm finding is a lot of the parents that I talk to are really transforming and breaking through, but there's a lot that are still lost out there, and they don't realize that their wounds that they haven't taken care of from their life are dictating how they show love and how they parent their children. And if their wounds aren't taken care of, then they're sort of bleeding on their children.
Yeah, and I see the cycle. I see it. Like it's this cycle that I don't see often broken in when the children are at school, because you see the parents and then you have these conversations and these meetings with the parents, and they cannot perceive in their mind that there is any problem or any different way, because that's what they know and that's what they put onto their children. So it's just that awareness that it's not okay. And, you know, I know a lot of my teacher friends, and I've experienced this myself, is especially if it's the first child, or it may not necessarily be like, but you're having that meeting with the parent and you're bringing up complications or difficulties with the child's learning to help support them better. And then quite often the parent will either change schools or just deny that there's anything wrong. And then this will go on for like, you know, prep year, the teacher is saying that there's issues. No, there's nothing wrong with my child. Grade 1, it's happening. Grade 2, it's happening. You know, grade 3. And then finally it starts to sink in that maybe there are some different ways that we can look at it. But a lot of the time parents don't realize, and this is really important, that a lot of government funding ends when the child is 7 years old. So 7 and under, there is so much government funding. And that's why we want to get onto it early in prep, grade 1. You know, grade 2 is really getting quite to the end of any support that we have funding in the state system to support the child. So if you're going to do anything or you have any questions, follow up with it as early as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'm guessing that's probably based on the common belief of how much of the brain is really formed up to the age of 7, and how many thoughts and perceptions are formed in that time. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, because there's definitely merit to it, but I think people get stuck on that and they think, oh, they're 7 or 8 years old now, it's too late. And that's completely wrong, I think. It's an unhealthy belief, which, like I said, may have foundation, but the brain's plastic. Like, our brain's constantly changing.
Oh, neuroplasticity, it's the most amazing thing.
Absolutely, yeah, neuroplasticity. I mean, it's something that was, I think it was discovered in the 60s, but it's been denied up until very recent times, where they can no longer ignore it.
Oh yeah, they can't anymore. And it's amazing, like, to understand. And that's a lot of what I used to teach in the health side of the health and PE, was the growth mindset and the neuroplasticity, and teaching, like, and I'd use that word because the kids loved it. Like, you know, the biggest words are the most interesting to them. And if you can explain in a way that they connect with, they absolutely love it, because then they can go home and tell their parents about it. And and the mental health side of it that I was able to teach in that way was really useful for them.
Yeah. And I like that point you make there, how eager and keen kids naturally are to learn.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And we underestimate them hugely, not only when they find their spark, but also naturally. They you know, as primal connections, a big part of my approach is just looking at our primal wiring and how we sort of worked in tribes thousands of years ago. And that wiring isn't thousands of years old, it's millions of years old. So it's hard to say, look, it's 2020 or it's 2021, it's that we're different now, because it's millions of years old.
Yeah.
And in our modern world, it just comes out differently, or we interpret it differently. So these
Yes.
kids, they know that their best chance of survival is one, connecting with their parent, and two, personal development, getting approval from the the alphas of the group can hang a lot on their competence and their ability to learn. And so they're
Yes.
naturally really wired to learn as much as they can and impress the parents and impress the alphas that they perceive around them.
Yeah, and that actually brings me to a very valid point. As a teacher, and if anyone is out there starting out in the teaching career, the best thing you can do is connect with the children that have the most the alphas in the room. And generally the alphas, in my experience, 13 years of experience, is the sporty outdoors, cool, popular, just laid back kind of kids. And if you can connect to them, then you connect with the rest of the class. And my behavior management strategies worked around, because I love being outdoors and active as much as those kids do, and the rest just kind of go along with it. So, my strategy would be use 10 minutes of outdoor activity if they completed all their work to a high standard and did everything else well. And then those alpha kids would be the ones being like, shh, do the right thing. What are you doing? And it was like the best behavior management strategy is because like the positive reinforcement and getting those kids on board. And definitely if you can use it in a positive way, because I know that a lot of behavior management issues come in with those alphas, and the disconnect in the way that teachers relate to them can make your year hell, or it can make your year super easy, fun, and with a lot of respect.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just like I said before, it's a social hierarchy as well. That's not only the way we think, but our social hierarchy is millions of years old and throughout different species and that. Hey, Jacob, by the way, sorry, I know you've been there a little while.
Hi,
I just want to
Jacob.
say, hey, Jacob, he says hello. Tara's watching too. I see you there,
Oh, hey,
Tara.
Tara.
Yeah, she hasn't commented yet, but I see her watching.
Oh, she better.
Yeah.
Where's the question, Tara?
Say hey, everyone. So social hierarchy, it's millions of years old, and that's what you're using there. There's a lot of groups today that say, abolish this hierarchy, this social thing. We're all, they just don't like the sort of, I guess, the nature of it. But if you sit back and watch, it just is just as engaged in everyone else, just maybe in denial. But
we're animals.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
reality, is we're animals, and we all have to have our different jobs and our different things we're good at, and that all fits into this nice little thing. Like as children, they're kind of learning what they're good at, and then sometimes, like if they've been told that they're not good at it or implied that they're not good at it, then they might hold back their natural instincts. But yeah, it's amazing to see it in the playground, how it naturally plays out, and it's amazing to watch. Yeah,
that's awesome. And this kind of brings us to another point too, like talking about playtime and learning as well, and how our nutrition just underlies everything they do and everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sorry, talking about the survival earlier as well, like
Yeah.
if they're not perceiving that their survival needs are looked after, so we're giving them junk food every day, and their bodies are constantly in this state of, I'm starving, but I'm full. Is that accurate, you think? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started teaching, my first year of teaching, the lunch boxes that came to school, I was just disgusted with. Like, I was honestly disgusted. And there was a very, very clear correlation. And I know a lot of people may not agree with this, but I've been in that situation. There is a very clear correlation between what is in that child's lunchbox and their behavior. And I don't care what anyone says, it was obvious every time. You look at a child's behavior, then you look at their lunchbox, and it just, if I'm hyped up on sugar or I've eaten the wrong things, I either go one of two ways. I either just can't sit still, like everything's just going. And like you said, like in that state of survival, like my body's just like, whoa, what's this going on? And like, even with, like we find a berry bush in the jungle, desert, wherever we are, like our mind says that if we don't eat it all, like this is an amazing thing that our body needs to survive, we have to eat it all. So then like all that rubbish that they're putting in, like their brain is switching on to a survival technique. And that happens a lot with a lot of my clients as well. But then, yeah, or the opposite end is I have absolutely no energy. I have my brain fog, like that happens. And like I know that quite often if we have like a staff room lunch or a birthday celebration and I've eaten all the cake and all the rubbish and everything that happens, the lesson afterward is nowhere near as productive. And I'm sure anyone can relate if they have any sort of intuition or any like connection with their body and the connection with the food they eat, and then the how they feel energy levels afterwards, there is a huge correlation. And I would honestly say, and this is why health is such a big important issue to me and why the world needs more health, and I would love to feed the children at school, is because I would say that probably 10 to 20% of lunch boxes are what I would eat myself. And
Yeah, wow.
I can understand. I'm not a parent. I have 5 nieces. I've been a teacher for a very long time. I can understand sometimes it is difficult, but like then there's all the time or there's the sometimes. And, you know, like I'd say sort of 10 to 20% I would eat myself. 20 to 30% I'd eat when I was having a lazy day. And then the rest of it I would not ever touch. And people that are very close to me I've seen the lunch boxes those kids go to school with, and I've had these conversations because they're close enough that I can have these conversations, and they don't see a problem with sending their kids to school with cordial, or they don't have a problem with sending their kids to school with nothing but packaged rubbish. And you know what? And I know I've had this conversation with them that some of them they think are actually not that bad, is in their words. And so yeah, it's disgusting in my opinion.
So it's like a lack of awareness, I guess, for a big part of it. And again, like
Absolutely.
what we were talking about before, what we're told to believe from the powers that be, you know, the food pyramid and all that sort of thing, it's all getting thrown out the door. It's all rubbish now, like finally.
It is, I know. And this was one of the main reasons that I quit teaching, was the bloody food pyramid. Like the food plate is slightly better version, and that's been around for I think probably about 10 or 15 years. Probably 10 years, the food plate as opposed to the food pyramid. But the food pyramid was still in the school curriculum. So everyone in Queensland that is doing health and PE, every child in Queensland is still learning about the food pyramid. And I just went, like, that was just one of a few aspects. Yeah. And like, it is so outdated, and there are so many better resources out there now. And I do not understand why it is still being taught in schools.
And unfortunately, I guess once that is imprinted and that's sort of concreted into people's mindset, that it's not that bad, and you know, cereal and whatever cereal, doesn't matter, cereal's good, right? Obviously that's not true, but that's what's being planted in people, and it's become so ingrained that it takes a long time for people to recognize the void in their health or in their attention.
100%. And this is one thing that I feel another very strong point about, is that because they start as very young eating all of this healthy or okay food, is not many people actually understand what it feels like to be healthy. And this is something that I personally went through my whole life, is that I grew up on the standard Australian diet, and up until I was probably about 25, ate that food, and I thought it was completely normal to feel sick after eating every single time. I thought how I felt was normal, and then I realized the headaches weren't normal, the absolute feeling of just wanting to be sick wasn't normal. All of these things that I grew up with completely being normal were not normal. And now that I feel healthy, I can now see the difference, and I now have that comparison. But most people, and most people don't understand what it feels like to be truly healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I made a change. It was, let's say, 10 years ago, or not even 10 years ago now. And before that, like, I did not know any better. I just thought, well, meat's healthy, so I'd eat a meat pie. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
so
And you
I'd have two
honestly
meat
thought it
pies for
was,
lunch.
yeah,
Like,
and that's it. Yeah.
and I thought it would paste like the pastry on the pie. I thought, well, it's not a lolly, it's not chocolate. It seems all right. And
Yeah.
then, so I thought it was just normal that, from that point, that by that lunchtime to the end of the day, how I felt was normal. But then when I
Yeah.
started to change it up, and I would have a good salad at lunch or something like that, and then my energy would be consistent throughout the rest of the day. Not only that, my mood, my attention was all consistent and healthy for the rest of the day. And I was like, what is this? Who is this?
Yeah. Oh my God, I can do so much and still have energy.
Yeah. And then after that, like, if you do go back to just eat a meat pie, it'll hit you like a freight train.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is what we're given to our kids, and then sort of trying to discipline them for not paying attention in school.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a losing
It's
battle.
unreal.
Yep.
I mean, that's why, I mean, some of the tools that I teach and helping them find their spark and things like that, it can be very hard to even get them to that stage where they want to fill out these tools, they want to learn about themselves and things like that. And people sort of can't understand why. And a lot of the time it can be just something simple like that, just a diet, where
Mm.
they just can't sort of keep that attention.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's
And
incredible.
then, and working with kids that, so both of my brothers did not suit the school environment. So I definitely have a soft spot for boys in particular. I find that aren't able to concentrate in the typical school environment, and the way we do certain things, and there's a theory behind it that it was setting us up for working in the factories, and following certain times, and like that's the way school is structured, and it had its purpose and it in its place when it was needed. But we have the way we run our world, particularly with jobs, particularly with career choices, is very, very different. So I really feel that school needs to catch up with that. And when kids don't connect with the way it's been taught or why it's been taught, then it's like us. Like, if I've been told to study accounting, I don't know, I just feel like, no. And it's like, when you present something to a child, if they don't understand why they're doing it or what they're doing it or what they're going to get out of it, or they're not loving it, then you can maybe make them do it, but it's not going to sink into their brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I've talked a fair bit about recently, is the linking to their values, like working out what they value as an individual, and
Absolutely.
linking the accounting or whatever it is back to that. It's incredible. And this is why, again, we just underestimate them in such a massive way, because we're grading them and assessing them based on what we believe they should value, what we believe they should want to learn.
Yeah.
We assess them on that, and then wonder why, they sort of get out of school, they leave school, and most commonly our predictions of each student, what I've seen, is far off, because once they get out and they get into the free world, they're more free to express their values and chase what they value, they skyrocket.
And it is unfortunate. I've had this discussion with a lot of parents, is that teachers and parents put onto the child a lot in high school what they think is safe and what they think they should follow, and they choose the subjects surrounding this. They, like, before that freedom is allowed, generally, like, they'll choose the subjects, they'll go to uni, and then generally start a career, and then it's too hard to break that, and that is unfortunate. And a lot of the time you see potential being let go because it's not safe, or it's not going to make money, or what career is that, and things like that, and things that they're really passionate about have to be put to the side.
And it's just a fact of life that risk-taking behavior is one of the key things to build competence. If we're willing to risk failing, then we can build our competence in just about anything, whether it's writing a book, or doing a report or a test, or whether it's climbing a side of a cliff. If you're not willing to take a risk, then you don't grow your competence. And if we're always teaching them to be safe and follow the line and just be perfect and be within the lines and just follow what other people say and they tell you, and we're just sort of pushing them through like cattle, and we wonder why they don't stand out.
Yeah, exactly, because we make them fit in, and then if you say the wrong answer in front of everyone, and how the teacher responds to that. And one of the biggest lessons I teach with my clients, with my students, is that failing is a good thing, even word association with failure as a positive thing. Because I always give the example of when you're learning to ride your bike, or when you're learning to walk. If we as adults were learning to walk again, we'd fail a few times. We'd be like, oh, that's not for me. Oh no, maybe the universe is telling me I shouldn't be doing that. I'll just let someone else do that. It's just like, no, that's not how it works. We have to fail over and over and over again and learn what worked, learn what didn't work. And failure is a really positive thing that we forget as adults. Or even like the children I work with, like I work from 4-year-olds up to 12-year-olds. The 4-year-olds are more like, yeah, let's do this. Let's just try anything. And then like as they get older, and the hierarchy and the social sort of constraints that come in, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, as they all come in, then a lot of kids are just like, oh, I don't know about that or this, and their beliefs about themselves that have grown from years, they all impact on their willingness to fail.
Yeah, that's awesome. I found one of the most effective things with my kids was celebrating every time they fall off their bike.
Yes.
Like celebrating it, and not, naturally we get a bit worried and we want to help them, but every time they fall off, I'm like, yes, what did you learn this time? And they just take that on, and it's just linking those neurons in their brain with fall off bike, learning. When those two neurons fire together, and we just keep on reinforcing that circuit. And now, like I've seen my boy, he's axed himself off his bike and taken skin off the side and that, and he just gets back on. He's like, did you see that? He gets back on and rides off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way we should do everything. Just like, it's like kids and scissors. Like I always say, just don't look, because it's just most of the time they hurt themselves badly, but you just don't look. It's just like, let them do it, let them work it out for themselves. And absolutely, like in a lot of my clients also talking about like celebrating when you're trying to make any change or learn anything. Like, so whenever you're trying to make any form of change, it's learning something different, learning a new way of doing it. So you have to celebrate everything, every small step in the right direction, because by having that negative association with it not going perfectly, then why the hell would your body and your mind want to do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. Because everything, like there is no negative without a positive. There's no without a negative. Like it's like that dualistic nature of nature, or nature of the universe. And whenever something, it comes down to what we said before, our perception, right? And every time there is a failure, or every time there's a setback or anything like that, it's just feedback. Just like if you constantly succeed, the drawback to that is that there's no learning. You're in the wrong room and you need to level up.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's again the fear of failure. Like the fear of failure will keep you in this comfortable little space where you're the king and you're doing great and you love it. But if you're not evolving, you're just going to stay there and revolve while everyone else is evolving. And then pretty soon, once you see that and you sort of get make the comparison to yourself, and then you get that that change in perspective where you're down here and they're up there, but you used to be the same. And then all of a sudden you start devolving because you've still got the fear of evolving. You don't want to stay where you are anymore. You get this different mindset and you start devolving again. And that all comes back to a fear of failure.
Yeah.
Or just an unhealthy relationship with failure.
Or the people around you also being uncomfortable. And like, then you like, they any change from the people around you, it makes them uncomfortable because they don't change on any way, shape or form is seen as a threat to life, because anything unknown is a threat to life. So your brain and other people around you will do anything to keep you in that revolving loop because that's safe, that's known. Even child abuse, like I've seen a lot of it as a teacher, that's all they know. So that to them is safe. Staying with their parents in a very unsafe environment is better than is better than the alternative, which is unfamiliar.
This is really powerful stuff. I mean, it's all well and good, like we say, it makes sense and all that, but it's like we need to really, really let this sink in and so that we can see it as it happens, because it happens all around us constantly. I mean, I think there's so many reasons why those around us will cut us down when we start to evolve, because not only what you said, but we're also shining a light. When we start to evolve, we're shining a light on their habit of revolving or devolving.
Yeah, and they don't like that.
The easiest thing to do to stop that is to bring us back down.
Absolutely.
But if you keep going, if you ignore that, or not ignore it, but don't let it happen, and you just keep going, and eventually they're going to have to come with you. Or
not, and that's okay too. Absolutely. But don't stop because of them.
Something else you said before, I mean, and talking about learning and things like that, and failure, and looking at the positive and the negative of every situation. You've mentioned to me before about working with learning difficulties and things like dyslexia, and I love dyslexia as an example, because just like ADHD and just like many of the other common labels, sometimes I'm jealous of these people who have these labels, because it's an incredible superpower. As much as in some way it can take away, just as much it can give on the other sense when you change your perspective around it. And even with dyslexia, I mean, I've worked with apprentices because I'm a diesel mechanic by trade, and I've had apprentices with dyslexia, and they have this ability to see things in a completely different way than everyone else.
And it's amazing. Yes.
And have you worked with students like that before?
Yeah, absolutely. So dyslexia and like learning difficulties, I've done, so I was mostly a primary school teacher, but I did also special needs at primary school, and also special needs or learning disabilities at high school. But a lot of the time I found that there were just gaps. It wasn't that they couldn't learn it, which a lot of our perception and themselves, and being told you're dumb by your peers, being told why can't you do this by a frustrated teacher, having these frustrations with parents. Children learn to believe that they're dumb, and as soon as they start to believe that they're dumb, a lot of the time they stop trying or go to the I can't do that. And there is no I can't, it's just I can't yet. That yet word is the most powerful thing. And so when I was working with the high schoolers that had learning disabilities, as a primary school teacher, I had the insight to be like, oh, this is the gap. Let's work on this. And the successes they had, even though some of these kids were like 15 years old, I was teaching 7-year-old stuff to. If they'd been taught that at 7 years old, imagine the difference. And that's the exact same thing with dyslexia. All of our brains work differently. And that is the magic about the way the world works, is we're all very different. Our fingerprints are different. Every one of us is different. Every one of our brains is different. And so when it comes to learning and the label dyslexia, how I explain it to my children and even their parents in a simple, very simplistic way is that in our brain we have cupboards. And in the cupboards we have different compartments. So on our left side, we have a compartment here, 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 and here. So there's sort of 3 main ones on this side, 3 main ones on this side. And there's eye tests that you can do to indicate which cupboard that they're using the most. So in our cupboard, when we learn something new, we'll put it into our cupboard. And if me, for example, when I learn a new spelling word, I'll put it into my visual remembered cupboard. And then when I need to go back and get it, I can find it easily and bring it out and use it. Whereas when children that are diagnosed with dyslexia, quite often, and this is quite often the case, is that sometimes they'll have it, and then other times they just won't. And it'll be the same question 5 minutes later or an hour later or a day later. And the people are just like, why the hell don't they have this? So what happens is they get to their room, they get to the door and just go, and they just throw shit everywhere. And that's kind of how their brain goes. And then sometimes when you walk into the room, you're like, oh, there it is. Sweet. Just like if you don't put your keys in the same place, or you don't put, your handbag in the same place. Sometimes you find it, sometimes you don't.
A bit like asking your kids to put stuff away in their room and they just go to the door and throw it.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is. And, sometimes they can find shit, sometimes they can't. And it's the same thing. So with dyslexia, when I'm working with dyslexic children, is I teach them which cupboard to put it in. And I teach them the technique, and we practice that over and over and over again, particularly with spelling, because spelling is the main focus, the main starting point to reading. And then if they can read, they can do math. And then it's like this follow-on effect. So if you can teach spelling and teach that, and teach them how to put it in that cupboard, and put it in that cupboard every time, then you can, then when they go to remember it, they can bring it out of that cupboard, and then that builds their confidence, then that builds their strategies, then that builds everything. So definitely, we all have these cupboards, and some use them more effectively than others. It's just like some people have cleaner houses than others. Like, it's just how it works. And being left-handed and right-handed, there's a definite effect on our cupboards, which ones we use for what. And so by doing simple tests, we can find out which cupboards that they're using for what, and then how to effectively retrieve the information when it's needed.
That's awesome. And that kind of touches on something we talked about before, how our brains love to understand something. Mm-hmm. And we tend to fear something that we don't understand. So with kids with dyslexia, for example, but I believe any kid, understanding their own brain will help to prevent them from avoiding learning and avoiding their dyslexia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Once they start to understand how they're working.
I teach that technique to every child, because that is so useful for every child. The children with dyslexia find it extremely useful. So I've taught it at several schools. Like, I've taught that system of spelling and learning to, I think, about 500 children. And the success of like one particular student was in grade 4, got 2 out of 10 spelling words right. And like, she should have had 20 or 30 spelling words in her list, but she was doing like 5 to 10 still in grade 4 and still getting most of them wrong. And I knew her mother, and I knew how hard they worked at it, and to still put that much time and effort into it and still fail, it was heartbreaking. So I taught her this technique, and then the next week she got 10 out of 10, and then every week after. And she just had so much success from the first time she ever did it that she's like, this is the best thing ever. And now she is quite a successful speller, and she's in high school, and like, to see that shift in her was amazing.
Incredible. And it's funny you say that, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking that's essentially the sort of base of the work that I do, is just helping people understand brain and their kids' brain, and that's all it is, just understand how we work.
Yeah.
So there's less avoiding. There's more taking it and making the most of it, making use of how we work. But just like we spoke about before, getting to know what our kids value, and then linking that into geometry and accounting and maths and English and all that sort of thing, finding the link. So help them understand what they value, how they work, how they unconsciously live to their values, and then combine their conscious with it. and then link that, as I said, to everything else.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we totally underestimate the capability of our kids. We at 10, 12 years old, they could possibly, I believe, be operating what we see as a 16 or 17-year-old. If at an earlier age, they change their trajectory into this growth mindset.
Yes.
They're
And believing that it's possible and believing that they can do it.
absolutely believing they can. So they're not afraid of failure. They've got a better relationship with failure. They know that they'll grow from it, so they embrace it. Not only that, they align everything with what they naturally value the most. I mean, if each one of those little things is another increment pointing their trajectory higher and higher, and we do that from a younger age, there's no telling what they're capable of.
Imagine how amazing our world would be if we had a bunch of adults believing in themselves.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Not, instead of people waiting until they're 30, 40, 50 before they say, maybe I'll do what I love.
A midlife crisis, I believe they call it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, the midlife crisis is essentially just when that void that builds over time eventually becomes big enough and it says, hey, enough's enough. Start fucking doing what you love.
Yep. The discomfort of staying the same becomes more unbearable. So
That's
they need to shift to what they know is deep down inside. Yeah.
Because humans, animals, like any living creature, won't move a muscle or do anything, unless we see more benefits than drawbacks.
Absolutely.
But the key word there is what we see. So what we don't see, maybe.
And what we believe.
Absolutely. What we believe, what we perceive, there'll be many more benefits and drawbacks than what we're aware of. I mean, it comes down to our five senses, right? Our five main senses, and how we take in the world and then how we interpret the world. We only see 0.01% of what's around us.
Yep.
The vibration, the light, the feel, the touch, everything. We only see 0.01%.
Unless you're autistic. And then that's a whole different story. Yeah.
But the same goes with our perceptions and what we see in information, in what's actually available to us in the way of benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah, and our brain can only take in 7 bits of information at a time, plus and minus 1 or 2. So if there is it's amazing. When I teach a lesson, this is the perfect example of what's taken in. When I teach a lesson to an average of 25 children, we get to the end and I'm like, what are your takeaways? What did you learn from this? Like some kids will come out with the most random things, but that's what they learned in their world. Like I can be teaching math and they'll be like, I learned that I like pink. Awesome. Cool. Right. That's where your brain was in that moment, and that's what you took in. And were they in a state of survival because their basic needs aren't being met and they couldn't take in anything else apart from I feel safe? Or were they in a position to take in everything that I'd learned because they had the foundations? And no one ever takes in everything I teach. Like in a lesson, if I'm teaching 10 things, no child is going to take away the 10 things, and that's okay. Like that's why we reiterate. That's why we do, that's why we have to see things over and over again. Everyone does.
And that's why you sort of attack things from a different angle each time, because each kid will take in whatever he sees unconsciously or consciously aligns with what he values.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, incredible stuff.
Yeah, our brains are so cool. I love them. But they can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and it'd be nice if there was more best friends in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And like anything, I mean, how often in the playground when we were kids did we not like another kid, or we thought they were weird, or we thought this and that, until we got to know them and we realized they're actually really cool? Because maybe before, like we said, we didn't understand them, so we feared them. But then we interpreted that as, no, they're just weird, we're not scared of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like our brains. Once we get to understand it and say it again, that we underestimate our kids and their ability to understand their own brain. Because I find some kids that you talk to, you start explaining a little bit about how their brain works, and then they say, yep, this happened, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I know. And then I think like this, and then I think like that. And they're like, these kids have so much more insight than most grown-ups I talk to.
Because they don't have the society filters. They don't have the bullshit that's been put on them for years on everything. Yeah, kids can just pick up so much so quickly. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's incredible. And it's like we said before, I find especially also in the neurobiology world, in the psychology world and all that sort of thing, the gap between us as a species learning something about the brain or about our psychology and then actually implementing it into curriculums and into practices is so far apart that once it's implemented, it's already disproven back here.
Yeah.
Like, it's unreal. But then that's what has to be taught. That's what we're teaching our kids. And then once they get 10 years older, then they're finally catching up and we're trying to reprogram them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
Unreal. Yeah, just a reminder, guys. Thanks, Jacob. And yeah, there's a few people watching. Make sure you ask any questions or jump in if you like. But yeah, apart from that, I think we've already gotten so much out of tonight. So many different subjects. It's been awesome.
I know. There's just like so many tangents, and I could just keep going down the rabbit hole about so many of them. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Nutrition I found was I really like talking about that. That's not an area that I delve into a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people who do. My area and what I love to study and read about just isn't food, it's all the other stuff. So it's been really good to have a chat with someone about the food and about all that stuff. And another thing I was sort of thinking when you were talking about that too was, it's a matter of months. It's a matter of months that every cell, or 99.9% of the cells in our body, are replaced, like completely replaced.
So yeah, blood's so skin's every 30 days, blood's every 12 weeks, bones are every couple of years. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, so and like our liver goes a whole new liver in 40 days. So, you know, anything in your body, if you, and like this is, you know, I work with clients that have injured their shoulder 10 years ago. There is nothing in your shoulder that is still injured. It's just your brain deciding it's still injured. And so this is the biggest thing. Is it neurological tightness? Is it muscular tightness? Was it an acute injury? Was it this? And like, yeah, so your body, so any changes you make have an immediate positive impact. So nutrition wise, absolutely. Any changes you make in a positive way or a negative way have an immediate effect. And yeah, definitely anything that affects our liver, 40 days, a whole new one. Our gut lining, I can't, like, I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember. But yeah, and like all of the things in our body. So like our blood, you know, our blood takes all of our nutrition to where it needs to whether it needs to repair something, whether it needs to grow something, whether it needs to, you know, remove anything. So if your blood has the right oxygen, has the right nutrients, and the thing is, like, this was a big problem that I had too, is that having knowledge of what works for your body and what doesn't work for your body, and finding out what didn't work for my body, because my body, even though when I started eating healthy food, it had built up this layer or this tolerance of protection in my gut that didn't allow that nutrients to actually get into my body, because it was just like, there are so many things that are wrong here, we're just going to try and protect you and just not take anything in. And then so I had to go through a process of working with a naturopath too. And like, you know, I was against naturopaths. I was completely against anything natural. And I went to doctors for 15 years, operations, everything. And then someone finally said to me, I was at my wit's end with certain health issues, and someone said, I've got a naturopath. And I'm like, what have I got to lose? Like, I was just like, whatever. I just have nowhere else to go. And immediately she was able to help me with natural therapies, with minerals, with vitamins, to allow my body to be in a much better position to take everything in. So it can be very, very simple to bring your body back to a healthy state with nutrition.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love too what you're saying about how much the brain affects all that, because like, as we know now, and as we're sort of proving more and more each day, that how everything is connected, and it's that holistic approach that is required for things. Just a few things too, like with the brain and with healing, with injuries and things like that. And belief, like the belief about I can heal this, I'm just going to have to heal it. Like, I've read about some incredible athletes and elite soldiers and things like that, or people like that, who just train through injuries. And I'm not recommending that or anything like that, by the way, but they just push themselves through these injuries and just train through it, and they heal so much faster than anyone else when they do
because
rest.
they have the belief. So a couple of things there, like, absolutely. Like the mind, when your mind says your body's done, it's only at 40% done. So a lot of the time we don't push ourselves even beyond the 40. Like, we don't even, like, it gets close, it's getting uncomfortable, it's getting not so good, and we're at 20-30% of our body's capability, and then our brain convinces us, okay, that's enough, let's stop. But even when our brain thinks our body is completely done, it's only at 40% of its capability. So that's just a huge awareness factor there. But then also, I worked as a mobility coach, and as on a personal level, I broke my leg really badly, and my brain decided that that was an injury that it needed to protect. Even though all my x-rays were showing everything was healed, it was all back to normal, I still couldn't walk. And it was just like, okay, the only thing stopping me is my brain had switched off those muscles, had switched off everything that needed to protect it, and it did its purpose. It did it to protect me, which is fantastic, or creates excessive tightness so you don't use it. So quite often with people with back pain, or like, your back twinges and then you can't move, it's your brain has switched to protect you. And that's okay in the interim, in the immediate right now. But then when 6 months later I still couldn't walk and my muscles still weren't turning on, that was my brain protecting me, but it wasn't necessary anymore. So to work on those neurological pathways again, and to get the motor neurons firing again in my muscles, to get everything activated. If they were there before, it's a lot easier to get them back. If they've never been there and you have to rebuild them or build them from the start, it takes a lot more. But that was the process that a lot of people come to me with old injuries that weren't ever an acute injury. They weren't a break, they weren't a tear, they weren't anything, but their brain has just switched off or on certain protection mechanisms that create discomfort. So then we avoid using that sore shoulder, which then we create new muscular patterns, which then can create imbalances, which then can actually create issues. So our neurological tightness is quite often most of what people experience, not the mechanical. It's not the actual physical reason. It's your brain.
Yeah, that's incredible. And like I was saying before, I think it's a lot of demand and supply, because there's the case of people who just train through it and push through it, and they've got a mission, they've got no choice, it has to heal, so it heals fast because it's on demand. But if you just nurse and nurture an injury, then there's no reason for it to get better.
No, avoid.
Well, you're just going to nurture it, so just
create more problems.
Focus your brain and your body will just focus its energy on it everywhere else. Like, great, your body's become more efficient in a way.
Yeah, its job is to adapt, and it has adapted. It just isn't useful for you. It's not useful for longevity. Like, we live a lot longer than we used to. So it needs to adapt to that, and body autonomy, using your body in a way that you want to use it. So if you still want to run with your kids, if you still want to climb on the playground, if you still want to bend down and tie their shoelaces because they can't, because they haven't learned how to do it yet, if you want to do that, then you need to work with your body to create that body autonomy, because if we don't use it, we lose it with our brain, with our muscles, with our movement, with our body. So it's really important to understand that you can still have it, and it's not just normal as we get older to not be able to move that way or not be able to do that. I'm just getting older. That's bullshit.
Yeah. That's right. People seem to retire at an age where they've got the most experience and value to offer the world. They go and retire and stop giving, because that's just the norm. It's like what we do. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
I remember when I rolled my ankle really bad, I never went and got x-rays or anything, but for a week or two I couldn't really put any weight on it. But in saying that, like, I was someone who just could not sit in the one spot for too long. Probably why I didn't go to hospital or anything.
Yeah.
I just had to move around. I had to get around. I had to find a way, right? So I created the demand to my. There was a track where I was living at the time. There was a track that was probably a few hundred meters down sort of rocky bits and really rough paths to get down to a creek. And I used to go down there every day with my dog and a steak and a couple of beers and sort of sit at the creek. And not having done that for a few days, I was like going crazy. And I had a big steel barbecue that I made out of an old truck battery box. And I had I had a few beers, this is years ago. I had a few beers and a couple of steaks and had my dog, and like trying to carry all that down this rocky path with assume a broken ankle. Just I couldn't put weight on it.
Yeah.
It was incredible. But once I started doing that, it started healing a lot faster because it didn't have a choice.
And that's the amazing thing that we know now about, like, so whenever any ligament injuries or any surgeries that we have, they get people moving as quick as possible, because blood flow to the area carries nutrients that heal. And so any movement, so I'm not recommending pushing through pain necessarily, but movement in a safe, healthy way will absolutely heal it so much quicker. And bones and ligaments are very different. So because ligaments, it potentially was ligament damage or potentially was bone damage. Bone damage, 6 weeks, our bone can be completely healed, or 6 to 8 weeks, 8 weeks to be certain. Ligaments are made of collagen, which take about 10 to 12 weeks to fully repair themselves. So that takes a bit longer. But if you have blood flow without the inflammation, without the continued tearing, then that is the quickest way to heal, is by movement in a safe way,
old controlled sort of way, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe not necessarily walking down to the creek with something heavy, like, but it's great that worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane that, like, it took me like an hour to get a couple 100 meters, and then it took me a lot longer to sort of decide to go back up again as well. So
yeah.
I guess I was being somewhat careful.
Yeah.
Another point that sort of came up for me, I know we're sort of getting on time here, but with the brain,
might
and
just
the
have
way
to do another one.
Yeah, we'll just have to do another one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could keep talking. With the way that everything is joined, and the way that our brain is just a part of every symptom and everything that happens with us. This turns out to be really, really common, because I decided to do a little bit of research into it. But I had a case of someone who, they said their daughter never ever listened to them, always ignored them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they got a hearing, to the point that they got a hearing checked, because it often seemed very innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So they went and got a hearing checked, and there was nothing wrong with her ears or anything like that. Everything was perfect, but it just kept on going on. And like I said, it seemed very innocent, things like that. And what we ended up working out was, when this little girl was a baby, and when she was in a room and it was like late at night, they're going to bed and all that, there would be screaming, like parents fighting or siblings fighting. There was always a lot of screaming going on. And the way her brain looked after her and herself, because the only thing it could do was block that out, that area of her brain.
Yep.
And it didn't develop as well.
Yeah.
So everything from her ear to her brain was perfect, but she wouldn't develop that part of the brain because it just kept getting trauma.
Yeah. And I find it's really interesting that you bring that up. A lot of mothers I find, or the parent that spends the most amount of time with the children, they're like, they never listen to me. And a lot of it does relate to, it becomes this white noise.
Yeah.
They honestly don't hear it. And it's funny when I'm teaching a class, and whenever I want to read a story, I'll look it up on YouTube, because a different voice and a different tone goes in so much better. Like, they hear me talk all day, or a majority of teachers are female. The second a male voice is in the school, whether it's a father, whether it's a groundsman, whether it's anyone, they all just stop and turn. Like, there is no catching their attention from a male voice. And it's crazy how just that our brain's ability to kind of like switch things off, that we just hear over and over again, because if there's no real need for us to pay attention to that, then why would we?
Exactly. It's just like when you get used to a certain smell, like you ask a garbage man, he can hardly smell the rubbish.
Or a piggery.
A piggery, exactly. Stuff like that.
Yep.
I've worked with horses for years and years, and I could never smell it. But I'd walk in, I'd leave the farm and I'd walk into a pub somewhere, and everyone's like looking at me. Smell it, well, it stinks. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because it's not relevant. We've established that it's safe. It's not a threat. So Absolutely. Our brains will just focus on other things.
Yep, 100%.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Jacob said, no questions, so much awesome knowledge. Love Sarah's perspective from actually being a teacher.
Thanks, Jacob. It's been good talking about it.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been really good. I think we've got heaps out of this, and we've had a bunch of people coming and going, and a few people staying throughout the talk. So that's been really good. That's awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on here and donating your time. Just to
you're welcome.
Educate us and help us with a lot of things. I'm sure a lot of people, the amount of stuff that we covered, I'm sure a lot of people got a lot out of this.
Yeah, there was a lot of topics, like all similar and kind of connected, but all could all be like their own week-long talk. I could talk about some of these things all day and all night.
Well, that's backs up our point of just the way that everything is connected to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that holistic and foundational approach that we need to take.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been great. Thank you for a great conversation.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And I'm sure we'll have you on here again soon. And
absolutely.
Your page, So Life Coaching, is that it?
Yeah, So Life Coach. Yeah, so that's on. I post a lot of things on Instagram and also Facebook. So check it out. All about health and nutrition and exercise and mindset, getting your mindset right to make the right food choices, to make the right exercise choices, and health on a long-term scale.
Great. So yeah, Sarah Osborne, thanks a lot for coming and joining us, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much. It's been great. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.